What's happening everyone, my name is Alex and welcome back. For this camera comparison we have the latest action camera from SJCAM, we have the SJ10 Pro. Now this is a waterproof camera that can record in 4K at 60 frames per second, but if you are looking to buy this camera you're gonna have to spend somewhere around $250. So this is definitely not a cheap action camera. For our second camera we have the GoPro Hero 8 Black, and once again this is a waterproof camera that can record in 4K at 60 frames per second, but if you're looking to buy this one you're gonna have to spend somewhere around $300, so a bit more expensive. So we're gonna divide today's video in three sections. In the first section we're gonna check out and see which camera has a better internal microphone. In our second section we're gonna check out and see which camera has better image stabilization. And in our last section we're gonna check out and see which camera has the best video quality. And of course I have videos filmed during the day and during the night. And with that being said, I think we should start by checking out those sample recordings so you can see which camera has a better internal microphone. So let's check out those recordings and I'll be right back. Alright, this is a quick microphone test between the GoPro Hero 8 Black and the SJCAM SJ10 Pro. So I'm currently talking in front of the cameras and it's also a bit windy. Next I'm gonna start riding the bike, so we'll have a bit more wind, but at least you can see which camera does better with the internal microphone for something like this. So we'll turn left here and we'll keep going. So yeah, this is how the internal microphone on these two action cameras would sound like. And for our second audio test, I am inside the car and I have all the windows closed, so you shouldn't hear anything aside from my voice. So no wind and no music, no nothing. So this is how the internal microphone would sound on the GoPro Hero 8 Black and on the SJCAM SJ10 Pro. And as you've heard for yourself, there is a pretty massive difference between the SJ10 Pro and the GoPro Hero 8 Black. The GoPro Hero 8 Black sounds much better. Now, both cameras can take external microphones, so you could improve the sound with an external microphone, but I just wanted to show you how the sound recordings would sound with the internal microphone. So the GoPro Hero 8 Black is much better. Now for our next section, I'm going to show you some recordings so you can see which camera has better image stabilization. And in the first recording, I'm actually going to show you how the sound from the internal microphone sounds if you are recording behind the cameras, because for the first two sample recordings that you've seen, I've recorded in front of the cameras. So for the first video that you're about to see, you'll see where the sound was coming from each camera, but after that I'm only gonna show you recordings with the internal microphone from the GoPro Hero 8 Black because it sounds so much better. And with that being said, let's check out those recordings and see which camera has better image stabilization. Alright, so for this test we are checking out the image stabilization on the GoPro Hero 8 Black and the SJCAM SJ10 Pro. So for this recording I'm doing 4K at 30 frames per second, and of course at this resolution both cameras have image stabilization. Now I have the GoPro Hero 8 Black set to the maximum level of image stabilization, which is called Boost. So this is how recording would look like if you're walking normally. And we're back in the exact same spot, and I'm also gonna do a bit of running so you can see which camera does better while running. Once again, I have the image stabilization set on the GoPro Hero 8 Black to the maximum level of stabilization, which is Boost. On the SJCAM we only have one level of image stabilization. For our next test, I am on the bicycle and I'm recording in 4K at 30 frames per second with both action cameras, and I'll try to go as fast as I can so you can see which camera has better image stabilization basically. So let's go this way, and I guess we'll turn left here. So yeah, this is our recording from the SJCAM SJ10 Pro and the GoPro Hero 8 Black would look under these conditions. Alright, so from what I've seen, if you walk nice and slow, the SJCAM SJ10 Pro does a bit better for image stabilization. So whenever you're walking slow and making basically slow movements, the SJCAM does seem to handle those movements better. Now, as soon as you start doing something crazy like running or you're on a bike or something like that, the GoPro Hero 8 Black does much better. So there is no comparison whenever you're doing like crazy movements in between these two. So if you just plan on walking nice and slow, the SJCAM will do great, but if you plan on doing some other crazier things, the GoPro Hero 8 Black does have much better image stabilization. Alright, so next we're gonna see a bunch of other recordings at different resolutions so you can see which camera has better video quality. So let's check out those recordings and I'll be right back. We are moving on to another quick recording between the GoPro Hero 8 Black and the SJCAM SJ10 Pro. For this recording I'm doing 4K at 30 frames per second, and of course at this resolution both cameras have image stabilization. So we'll stop here and we'll pan left slowly. Then we'll pan right, so towards the shadier part here. So yeah, this is how recording in 4K on a super sunny day would look like from these two action cameras. Next we have a quick 1080p at 60 frames per second recording between the GoPro Hero 8 Black and of course the SJCAM SJ10 Pro. Now the GoPro can also do 1080p at 240 frames per second, and we even get image stabilization at that resolution. The SJCAM can only do 1080p at 120 frames per second, but we don't get image stabilization at that resolution. So we only have image stabilization up to 1080p at 60 frames per second. So this is how recording in 1080p at 60 frames per second between these two action cameras would look like. We are moving on to another quick recording in 1080p at 30 frames per second between the GoPro and the SJCAM. Of course, at this resolution, both cameras have image stabilization. We're gonna be walking towards the water there. So obviously you're gonna hear the sound from the water aside from my voice the closer we get to the water there. So we're gonna pan right slowly and we'll go back up on these stairs. So this is how recording in 1080p at 30 frames per second between these two action cameras would look like. And we're moving on to another quick recording in 4K at 30 frames per second between these two action cameras. As I mentioned earlier, at 4K at 30 frames per second both cameras have image stabilization, and the SJCAM can also do 4K at 60 frames per second. However, at that resolution we don't get image stabilization. Next I'm gonna show you a clip in 4K at 60 frames per second just so you can see how that looks. So I'm gonna try crossing the street. This is a super cool looking car. I wanna see it better from this side. So yeah, this is how 4K at 30 frames per second between these two action cameras would look like. Alright, so next we have a quick recording in 4K at 60 frames per second. So at this resolution, the SJCAM doesn't have image stabilization. With the GoPro Hero 8 Black, of course, we get image stabilization at this resolution as well. So I'm not gonna walk too crazily, so you can see how the recording would look like in 4K at 60 frames per second on the SJCAM. So I guess we'll stop here and we'll pan left slowly. And back right, and we'll keep walking for a bit so you can see how the image would look like without image stabilization on the SJCAM, and of course with image stabilization on the GoPro Hero 8 Black. I also want to show you how the image stabilization works if you're recording in 1080p at 60 frames per second. So I'm gonna go running for a bit, not very long because I don't run that much. But yeah, this is how the image stabilization would look like on these two action cameras if you're recording in 1080p at 60 frames per second. Alright, so from what I've seen, I have to say that I was quite impressed by the footage that I got from the SJCAM SJ10 Pro. The footage did look much better than I was expecting. Not to mention that we almost get better dynamic range in some of those recordings, because if you look in those shadows, like under trees and stuff, you can barely see anything with the recordings from the GoPro. But with the recordings from the SJCAM, you can actually see the trees, the leaves and stuff like that. So I have to give it to them. The SJCAM SJ10 Pro does do really good for video recordings. Now, looking at that footage, it almost looks like the footage from the GoPro Hero 8 Black is a bit sharper, but I almost wonder if that sharpness doesn't come from that crazy contrast that GoPro is using for those recordings. Not to mention that all the footage that we get from that GoPro is oversaturated. Now, you can take the footage from the GoPro and the footage from the SJCAM and upload it on the computer, and you can edit that footage, so you can turn down the saturation or turn up the saturation. So there is a very good chance that you could actually make that footage from both cameras look somewhat similar. But what do you guys think? Which camera do you prefer for those daytime recordings? Do you like the SJCAM or the GoPro Hero 8 Black? Definitely leave a comment down below and let me know. Alright, next we're gonna check out a couple of low light sample recordings. I've done a couple of recordings at night, so let's check out those recordings and I'll be right back. Alright, and next we're moving on to a quick test in low light between the GoPro Hero 8 Black and of course the SJCAM SJ10 Pro. For this recording I'm doing 1080p at 30 frames per second. So we're gonna stop here, we'll pan right slowly and up, I guess. And then we'll keep going this way. So from what I'm seeing on the screens here, the GoPro does seem to do a bit better. But again, I'll have to see how this footage actually looks on the computer. Next we're gonna do a quick recording in 4K, but I'll find a darker place so you can see how the cameras do in a darker environment. Alright, and for our last recording in low light, I'm doing 4K at 30 frames per second with both cameras, and we'll walk this way where it gets a bit darker. Well, I can't really see anything on the screens of either camera. So yeah, this is how recording between the GoPro Hero 8 Black and the SJCAM SJ10 Pro would look like in low light. So after looking at those recordings, even though the footage that we get from the GoPro Hero 8 Black is a bit brighter, there is also a lot of noise in those recordings. So realistically, none of them does that great in low light. And ideally, you wouldn't film anything at night with any action camera because none of them does that great in low light. And it's even hard to choose one out of the two for those nighttime recordings. This one is brighter but has more noise. This one is a bit darker, but it seems that it has less noise. So none of them does that great at night. But what do you guys think? Which one do you prefer for those nighttime recordings? Definitely let me know in the comment down below. Alright, and looking at pictures, well, it almost looks like the pictures taken by the GoPro Hero 8 Black or pictures taken by a Samsung device. They are very saturated, very contrasty, where the SJCAM does a bit better for color accuracy in my opinion. So if you want the pictures that look a bit closer to reality, the SJCAM, I feel that it would do better. As for nighttime pictures, you're probably better off not to take any pictures at night with these two action cameras. So, to conclude this video, the SJCAM SJ10 Pro did much better than I was expecting. The footage looks super sharp from it, the image stabilization isn't great if you're running or biking or something like that, and the internal microphone sucks. But other than that, the camera does have pretty decent footage. Once again, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about these two action cameras. If you did like the video, don't forget to press that like button, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.